If you're thinking ahead to Easter or you're wanting just a really good spring meal, this pork roulade is one of my favorites, filled with apple and fennel and beautiful flavors. It's bright, it's delicious, it's perfect. Let's make some. When it comes to Easter celebrations, spring meals, things that you just want to enjoy and kind of have that spring festive feel, I love to do something that's a little bit more out of the ordinary. And for me, that's gonna be a pork roulade. So we're gonna use a pork loin roast and we're gonna cut it open. We're gonna fill it with a delicious filling of fennel and apple and onion and kale or spinach. And it's all gonna work together in this beautiful flavor that will really bring out the essence of the pork with some herbs, some citrus. It's a really bright, beautiful dish and it's great for spring. So to start, I wanna make the filling. I have onion chopped up and now fennel. If you have not used fennel, don't be scared of it. It's one of my favorite flavors to use and we don't use it enough. It's really good fresh in salads, but it's also really good cooked. It has a slight, don't let this scare you, anise-like flavor, but the bulb itself is a lot lighter in that flavor. And I would not think that if you don't like say black licorice, you're gonna say, well, I don't like this. No, you'll like this. It's a really beautiful flavor and works really well with apple. So what I'm gonna do is just take off any of that core and anything that looks a little bit more dried out or brown. That's the thing with fennel. It's really easy to prepare, but it looks like it should be scary. So what I do want to do though is just dice it up kind of, because we want it to be somewhat the same size as the onion so it can cook down. And already as I'm doing this, I'm getting that beautiful aroma of that fennel, and that is just a glorious thing. So see how those small pieces, inside of it you can see it has layers. So it kind of like an onion, it dices pretty easily and you don't have to worry too much. So I'm gonna do this other half and then we're gonna start getting them cooking in some butter. Once all that beautiful fennel that you're gonna be excited to use now is chopped up, we can just take that and the onion. Both of those together are gonna be the base of this delicious filling. And I'm cooking it in butter because I want that beautiful richness of butter to come through. This is a filling that's going in pork, and pork, as you know, just kind of by itself is not overly rich. And so you want the flavor to kind of be enhanced by that butter. So of course to this we wanna make sure we season it every layer. So we're gonna make sure we salt it, pepper it. I'm gonna chop up some garlic and some apple, and we'll add that here in a little bit, but let this cook. The onion fennel is just about done. It's getting nice and kind of just beginning to get golden. So what I'm doing is chopping up some apple, and I did par the apple. So I took off the peels and the core, and that's just for texture. Since we have everything in here, like onion and the fennel have nice soft texture once they're cooked, you want the apple to be a complementing texture. And sometimes if you leave a skin on, especially depending on what type of skin, it will become, kind of tough and you don't really want those pieces in there. So I did make sure to peel. Usually I'm not someone that peels lots of things, but in this case I did. Now I'm just taking some rosemary and some thyme and I'm finishing chopping that up too. The thyme I tried to take as many leaves off as I could, and a few of the smaller, like if you get some of these ends in there, you can just chop those up, but most of the leaves I try to do. And then I have a nice pile of some minced garlic here. We're wanting strong flavors again because pork can take it. Pork can take these beautiful flavors. And we're gonna take all this over with the herbs, with the apple. And if you look over here, you can see we're just beginning to get some color on all this. That's that perfect time to put in the garlic and the apple. I didn't want to overcook the apple, and especially the garlic too, because it can become bitter. So I just kind of want to toss these all together. And doing that, we should always do safety, and we should just do it with a stick, but I do like to just shake it together sometimes. I think that can work better. But what we're gonna do here is now just let that apple begin to cook. Then we're gonna put in some kale. We're gonna let this all just cook together, and it's already smelling amazing. So the mixture's been cooking. You can see it started to cook down and just become a nice kind of golden hue. It's just beginning to want to maybe kind of stick a bit on the bottom, which is the perfect time to add a little bit of white wine. Now, if you don't want to use wine, you can use a stock. Just a little bit deglazes that pan, and it adds a nice underlying flavor that really does work well with this whole mixture. So that wine, I just want to make sure I'm cooking it, and we're going to mostly cook that off. But what that does, you can see, is look how now the bottom of the pan just cleans up. All those beautiful bits get into this filling, which is what you want. It kind of adds an acidic flavor that kind of brightens up everything that wine does. And now we're just gonna add the kale. The kale is just frozen kale, and the reason I like doing that is it's already blanched, so it cooks pretty quickly here. So we're gonna add the kale in, and it's already chopped up. You can see all that. It's chopped up really nicely. And so we're just gonna put it in here, and it's gonna cook in no time. And if it's still a little frozen, Don't let that scare you. Just stir it in, let it cook, and now we're just gonna let everything work together here for a few minutes and let it cool off. So the mixture is completely cooked, and now I took it off, put it in a bowl, just letting it cool slightly before we actually fill it. And I'm, just to finish it and give a nice citrus pop at the end, some lemon zest that I wanna put in there, and I'm gonna cut my lemon and actually put a little bit of the juice. So anytime you add citrus at the end like this, it's just adding that nice pop of flavor that kind of wakes everything up. It kind of sits on the front of your mouth when you taste it, and you're like, ooh, you taste everything better, and I think that's the important part. And you can, of course, taste this mixture too, as you should. It's cooked for seasoning, for salt, for pepper. Taste every kind of layer just to make sure it's gonna be good. So while that is cooling, we can talk about the pork. So I think anytime you see a roulade, it can seem scary because how do you do that? You roll it, it seems like work. It really isn't. So this is a pork loin roast, and it's a center cut, meaning the loin is usually longer and it kind of goes down to a smaller tail type end. You want more of a center cut so it's as even as can be. You can ask your butcher. A lot of times what you buy in a grocery store will be. And what we want to do is butterfly it. So I've already started, and I took just a sharp knife, and I first did it in half. So right here, I opened it up like a book. And then I'm doing each of those halves. You can see a little bit more. See how I'm opening that up? And now this side is what all I need to do yet. So I think you have to just have the confidence to not be fearful. Now, the one thing I will say is on camera, it is hard for me to do this backwards so you can see it better. I will try, but it's best for me to kind of go the one direction, if that makes sense, that I'm used to. So what we're doing is just opening it up again like a book. And what that's gonna do is allow us to have more surface area. So anytime you do roulade, it is kind of so you can have that surface area that you're gonna actually get into and be able to cook from. So see as I'm opening this up, and you know what? If it looks bad on the inside, guess what? I'm not a butcher. You're probably not a butcher. If you are, bless you. But it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. So now what we're gonna do when that's opened up, just to kind of give it more of an even playing field, I like to cover it with some plastic. And I'm gonna pound it just a little bit, especially here in the center where I didn't get it as even. And we're gonna make it somewhat into an even field. And also you can see what it does is it opens up the seams a little bit. So you can just pound it and get it somewhat even, and then we can go on and fill it. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but what you do wanna do once that's done and it's opened up is season it. So I have a separate bowl of salt and pepper, just so I don't contaminate my normal salt bowl. I wanna make sure to season this well on the inside. Salt is a meat's best friend. This is gonna help enhance the flavor. And you know what? If you salt at every little point, you're gonna use less salt in the end. Because if you get something and you don't think it's well salted, you end up having to put so much more on it than if it would have just been salted well during it. So we're gonna put all that on, and now we have the filling. So I'm gonna start putting the filling on, and we're just gonna spread it then out a little bit, obviously. And you know, this is one of those things that, yeah, it's a little messy, but guess what? It's one of those special occasion things that you're gonna be glad you did it. One, because of the flavor, but also the presentation. So I'm gonna spread this out. You can leave a little bit on the edges if you want, because as you roll, it will press out a little bit too. But then we'll just start rolling it up. Now you're gonna notice I don't like bready stuffings and meat, so that's why this one's more of a fresh take on it, and that's what I really love. So we're gonna start rolling it. And again, this is the messy part, and we're just gonna keep rolling it. See why we had that surface area? Because now when we roll, it makes a much bigger roll than it would have otherwise. And when you get to the end, you can kind of just turn it so it faces long ways, because that to me is the easiest point then to start taking our strings that we have pre-cut, butcher's twine, because this can go in the oven, can go on the stove. If you use something synthetic, it could melt. You do not want that. So what I first like to do is somewhat place them on, and then take my others and keep placing them. You know, it kind of depends on your overall size. I like to keep them probably about 1.5 to 2 inches apart from each other. So the reason we're doing this is one, it's a roulade, so it's gonna wanna come apart if we don't do this. Two, it keeps it in even shape, so while it's cooking, it stays even and it cooks somewhat evenly, and that's important to do. So we're gonna take these, put them on here, and then we can start tying them up. Now, anytime I'm gonna tie meat like this with butchers, I wrap it one time like you would for a shoe, but then do it one more time. So that's a butcher's knot, and then when you take it tight, see how it holds without me having to give it pressure? That then gives me the chance to just go back and do my knot. Then we'll cut off the ends here that are extra at the end, but always go 2 times. So 1, 2, and that way when you make it tight, it holds. See, it holds without even that final knot. and then it's all ready to go, except we do have to cut off, of course, all these pieces. And that's just because in the skillet, in the oven, they'd get these little brown bits on them, which you don't need. So you can just go through and cut them off. I always like to go longer because it's a lot easier than going too short and having to recut them all. So you just cut them off. Now, as a final step, I will put a little bit more salt on the outside. I still have some in that bowl that I was saving for just this. And now, any of the filling, I shouldn't have to say this, but just in case, any of the filling that comes out, don't think you can go down and eat that. I know earlier I said it was cooked, but once it touches the meat, we don't eat anything. So don't eat any of that. But you can see now, I have it well salted. It's a nice package. I have oil heating up on the skillet. And what I wanted to tell you was what I did do, my hands are still dirty because I'm gonna touch the pork here yet, is I had a paper towel and I took out any of the bits that were still in the skillet from when I made the filling. But then we're gonna actually brown this in that skillet. So we're just gonna take it, we're gonna bring it over to the skillet, put it right in, and I'm gonna get it browned on all sides. So at this point you can see I kept turning it and I wanted to get it nice and browned. And yes, the skillet gets brown too, but that's okay. It just fits in the skillet. You can always use a roasting pan too if you need to, depending on the size that you're gonna get. But now that it's browned, that's just for color, texture on the outside. We're gonna just pop it right in an oven and we're gonna let it fully bake in the oven. Once it's done, we'll pull it out, we'll slice it. It'll be delicious. So I took this out of the oven a little while ago, but I wanted to let it sit for at least 15 minutes because look how big this piece of meat is. That residual cooking is gonna take a while and you want those juices to redistribute inside. So I'm leaving it for a little bit so it could really redistribute those juices. So when we slice it, it doesn't just get rid of them all because you don't want that. So now at this point, it really doesn't matter what end you slice from. I, for some reason, decided I needed to twist it, but you wanna get in there and you can cut the strings now or you can cut them as you're slicing it. It kind of doesn't really matter. It's a personal preference, but I usually like to get in there and make sure I get some of them out just when I'm gonna slice it here. And then you can go in, this is what I love, my favorite part. Look at that. Look at the filling right in here. Do you see how it's actually swirled? Because we took the time to make sure we opened it up enough. That was that book butterflying we did. Look at that, it's beautiful. Has just that beautiful pork pink hue. Of course, you check the temperature to know when meat is done. That's what I always do. And I always take it out 5 to 10 degrees under because that residual heat is going to continue cooking it when you take it out. Just like cookies, just like cake, anything. So now you have this beautiful, beautiful main dish. And it's one of my favorite things because pork is so tender if it's cooked well. And this beautiful filling inside of it, you have the apples, you have the fennel. It's just one of my all-time favorite combinations. It's so good. Look at that beautiful. That filling is absolutely superb. You get the hints of the fennel and the apple and the rosemary and the thyme. That pop of lemon, you're not noticing lemon, but you're getting a brightness from it that's really important. It's a beautiful dish. That pork is cooked just perfectly. It's beautifully tender, it's beautifully flavored, and it's seasoned well, and that's what's important. What I like about this is the filling doesn't make it heavy, doesn't make it overburdened with this bready, heavy filling. It's perfect for like Easter and spring where we're going with a little bit lighter, brighter flavors, and that's what this is. So what do I hope you do? I hope you feel confident to butterfly a pork roast. Try something new, have a beautiful presentation, because you can see this is impressive. People are impressed with this because it's gorgeous. And guess what? It takes really not too much work. You can get it ready, have it all ready to go, and then have this beautiful presentation for your meal. So I hope you're excited to do that. Share this video around so others can be excited too, and check my website, wiseguy.com, for this recipe and all my other recipes. Your Easter meal can be planned from my website. Let's do it together.